Hello, metalheads. There's a storm coming in, a Category 7 storm. But is this going to blow me away? Or is it going to be one of those summer storms that just leaves me in a tropical depression? Stay tuned and find out.
When the truth is sad, I'm becoming more distraught.
Hello, Heavy Metallurgy. My name is Alan, and I'm here today to review the debut self-titled album from Category 7. It's released on July 26th via Metal Blade Records. Before we get into the music, there is some backstory to this band that is worth going through. Category 7 is being billed as something of a supergroup. The lineup consists of John Bush on vocals. Folks will know him from his time in Armored Saint and also Anthrax. Also featured on guitar, you have Phil Demmel from Machine Head, Vio-Lence, and other projects, alongside Mike Orlando, who's been in several bands, including Nocturnal. On bass, you have Jack Gibson from Exodus, and on drums, you've got Jason Bittner from Shadows Fall and Overkill. So yeah, you've got a lot of veteran talent making up Category 7. I do want to say that I'm a little concerned about this being billed as a supergroup because that can set up a lot of sort of false expectations for a listener. First off, while all these guys are very talented musicians and they've all earned their stripes over lots of projects and lots of years in the heavy metal universe, they're not the kind of household names that people associate with the term supergroup necessarily. If you tell somebody Category 7 is a supergroup, the average metalhead might start thinking like, oh, it's got to be like Rob Halford plus Dave Lombardo plus, the ghost of Randy Rhoads or something. And while, all of these guys are excellent musicians, they may not quite have the name recognition that 9 out of 10 headbangers are going to immediately click and identify. So that when people then look at the lineup, they might be like, oh, I don't actually know some of these guys. What do you mean this is a super group? And then your potential audience already has kind of the wrong taste in their mouth because they feel like it's not the type of supergroup they were expecting. Another issue with billing a band as a supergroup is that, well, supergroups come with some stereotypes. Often people think of supergroups in the context of these rather ill-conceived projects where you had talented people who got together, but the parts didn't necessarily mesh very well. The interactions weren't very smooth. Egos got in the way of the music. And those projects, can often be short-lived and not always live up to expectations. So again, I hope the supergroup tag doesn't trip people up or cause them to go into Category 7 expecting something different. With that out of the way, well, let's talk about what the music is actually like. There are a couple of things about the Category 7 album that I really find enjoyable. The first one is definitely John Bush's vocals. He has one of the most recognizable voices in all of heavy metal history. If you know your heavy metal, all you need to hear are a few words and you're like, yep, that's John Bush. Folks know and love him from all his Armored Saint output. A lot of folks will also, of course, remember him from Anthrax and propping up a lot of not so great Anthrax albums. You know the ones I'm talking about, the ones where John Bush was kind of the one strong point going on a few of those. It's nice to have Anthrax back to doing really good albums, but John stayed with them and helped them through some pretty lean years there. Regardless, he sounds absolutely great here. He hasn't lost a beat, still sounds fantastic, and the vocal performance is a highlight on the Category 7 tracks. You can hear this, throughout the album. One highlight track that I would definitely recommend checking out is Apple of Discord.
Panel of doctors and your vitals are ripping apart. Thank you, and for little at all. Will do.
So yeah, you can tell right there, John is in fine form. It's the best track on the album, in my opinion. The second thing that I really enjoy on this album is the guitar soloing. Mike Orlando and Phil Demmel absolutely light it up. Every time there's a solo, it's like I want to just stop what I'm doing and focus on the fireworks that are on display here. They have really hot leads, but they never sound noodly or wanky. They're very sharp, focused, and pointed. The two guitarists play really well off of each other also. So yeah, the solo work here is outstanding. In fact, the closing number on the album is an 8-minute instrumental that is primarily used as a guitar showcase. And that may seem like an odd way to end an album. It's like, really? You want an 8-minute instrumental for the closer? But the guitar work here is so hot and it's such a big part of the album that I actually think it's kind of a good idea. It was a nice way to wrap up the album. It's like, you guys have just, played top notch, insane all the way through this. Here's the last track, cut loose and have fun with it. So I actually think is kind of a cool way to end this particular album. So while Category 7 has a couple of really strong selling points for it, as I've just described, and as you've just heard, there are some things about this album that I don't think hit the mark. The first thing that I noticed that was starting to bother me as I played the album repeatedly was the production of the drums. Now, Jason Bittner's performance is fine, no complaints there. The drums are mixed very loudly in the production, and they have a very clicky sound to them. I mean, a very clicky production. Between them being loud and clicky, when you combine the drums with John's vocals, and his voice can fill a lot of space. He's got a very strong, powerful voice. The album starts to feel like it's really dominated by just vocals and percussion. And meanwhile, the stringed instruments are kind of just waiting for any chance to kind of, poke their head out and get to do their thing. So, yeah, I don't really like the way the drums are produced and mixed into the recording. Second thing that I don't enjoy about the album are the lyrics. And I don't have the official lyrics to the album. They weren't included with the promo material, but the lyrics to several songs have been posted online. And when I listen to the song and read along on these secondary websites, the lyrics seem like they are accurate. And it's like, yeah, this matches up with what John Bush is singing line by line. But the lyrics are kind of nonsensical. I was kind of hoping that in a few cases they would tell me more about the song, what the intent is. I could always pick up, a few words and lines here and there, but I wanted to get a better feel for them. After looking up the lyrics, I have to say I'm more confused than I was before I could actually read the lyric sheet. The words are kind of just a mishmash jumble. In several cases, it feels like they're almost trying to come across with this kind of faux tough guy in the streets mentality. And I don't think that really fits the music particularly well. So, sorry, but I got to say that the lyrical content is kind of a miss. It feels almost stream of consciousness like at times. It just doesn't seem to have a lot of direction, and it certainly doesn't help illuminate what the tracks are supposed to be about. I know this won't be a big deal for some folks because a lot of people don't pay that much attention to lyrics in heavy metal. Me personally, I like to know what the band is singing about. I think that's part of what they're conveying in the music. Why wouldn't I want to know them? In this case, they are detracting from my enjoyment of Category 7 a bit. I hate to say it, but that is the way I feel on them. The third issue that I'm having with this album is that it's kind of hard to describe Category 7's sound. Now, they don't have to fit neatly into some particular box or subgenre. That's not necessary whatsoever. But again, playing this album over and over, I was just having a hard time figuring out, it's like, how does this album make me feel? I'm somebody who listens to music when I'm in different moods. I pick certain styles of music. And I was trying to figure out, like, when am I going to want to listen to Category 7 in the future? The music is relatively heavy, but not all the way to the point of being like a thrash album. I've read several online reviews of the Category 7 record where people refer to it as a thrash outing. And I have to say, I disagree. I don't think this is meant to be a thrash album. Yes, several of these guys have thrash bands in their pedigree. And yes, there are parts, especially in the rhythm section, that you can identify and feel like, okay, this particular bass line could come from an Overkill album. This particular drum pattern, yeah, that could fit into another thrash product for sure. But then the vocal approach and the guitar approach doesn't feel thrashy at all to me. So this isn't something I'm going to listen to when I'm in the mood for thrash. At the same time, the album, it's a notch heavier than your typical sort of classic traditional heavy metal offering. It's not on the same level as say a Judas Priest, Iron Maiden. It's definitely heavier than the Riot Fives of the world or the Bands on Frontiers label. It's trying to be a little more aggressive and heavier than that kind of stuff. And so it kind of falls into a little bit of this weird no man's land where it's a little hard to pin down what they're going for. The more I thought about it, the more I kind of really wanted to figure out, where is this sound coming from? And it does feel like we've got a little bit of that supergroup tendency for members to potentially have brought in sounds from some of their past projects, and now they're kind of meshed together here. For example, there are elements of this album that I can see John Bush having brought in from his years in Anthrax. There are a few parts I can even see identifying with some of Armored Saints material. One of the big elements I've noticed is that the album has some similarities to Shadowfall, Jason Bittner's band he's been a longtime drummer for. They're technically still listed as an active band on Metal Archives, even though Shadowfall hasn't done an album in like 12 years or so. So when I'm comparing to Shadows Fall, I'm thinking in particular of the era around the Art of Balance. You got that same kind of push towards an aggressive sound, but not all the way into full-blown thrash territory. You've got the same tendency to have some really explosive guitar work in the breaks. You still have these kind of slightly aggressive, angry-ish vocals. There's a difference there, of course, whereas Shadows Fall sometimes it leaned a bit more metalcore with their vocal delivery. John Bush is not doing that, of course, but again, he is doing kind of this powerful, more angry voice at times. And when you combine that with some of those, again, sort of oddly aggro but strangely put together lyrics, you once again kind of get back to that same vibe. And so, yeah, you start to identify that these guys, may have just, brought in some influences from the stuff they've done in the past, which would be a natural thing to do. But I'm not sure at the end of the day I like the way those elements have necessarily lined up. Category 7 has some really good things going for it in the vocal delivery and the excellent guitar work. But this idea that it sort of feels like a revamped Shadows Fall with John Bush singing for them, I'm not sure that's really my cup of tea. And as such, I'm not sure the Category 7 album is going to be one that I revisit very often moving forward. It's certainly not a bad album. If you're a huge John Bush fan, I would recommend checking it out. And if you worship at the altar of the electric guitar, this one is worth at least one or two listens just to hear the showmanship going on with the six strings. Again, Orlando and Demmel really, really nail it throughout the album. But yeah, in terms of why would I want to revisit this album a lot in the future, I'm kind of left without an answer. It's not something that's aggressive enough that I'm going to want to hear it when I'm in an aggressive mood. It certainly doesn't go far enough into Pantera territory that anybody's going to want to listen to it when they're in the tough guy street brawler mode. It doesn't have full-blown thrash chops to it. But I'm also not going to want to listen to something quite this aggressive if I'm in the mood for just a classic US power metal outing either. So yeah, unfortunately, at the end of the day, I have to say maybe Category 7 just isn't quite for me. It feels like it's a style that has a lot of talent behind it, but the parts just don't quite add up to something that I'm going to be interested in making a long-term part of my personal playlist. That's going to do it for this review. If you're enjoying material here on Heavy Metallurgy, keep an eye out for more album reviews. There's a lot of good stuff that's come out here at the very end of July. There's at least 7 different albums released on July 26th alone. Category 7 is just one of the 7 by chance. The name worked out that way. But yeah, there's at least 7 big albums that have come out on that same day that I think are all worth people checking out to see if they're to their liking or not. We'll be reviewing some of those here in the coming days on Heavy Metallurgy. And of course, we have live streams on Wednesday nights and Friday nights that people can check out and participate in as well. So until next time, everybody take care. And as always, keep banging your head.